In this video, we're going to dive into T versus F, thinking versus feeling, and the distinction in Myers-Briggs between those two ways of making decisions about the world. Now, this was one that I had to learn a lot about to get right, so stay tuned, it's juicy. So the thinking versus feeling pair of preferences are related to the third pair of functions, which are basically the way that we like to make decisions about the world around us. Now remember, E and I, extroversion, introversion, which is where we get our energy and direct our attention and focus. The N and S is how we like to gather information about the world. And the TF, thinking, feeling, is how we like to make decisions about that information that we've gathered. And so and this is where Myers-Briggs, Carl Jung used a terminology that already has some baggage in our everyday vernacular. We have already ideas associated with what it means to be a thinking person versus a feeling person. So I want to invite you to let go of that baggage, let go of any preconceived notions you have about these two words, and really approach these words neutrally in the way that I'm going to describe them here. So here, in the context of Myers-Briggs, thinking doesn't mean smart, and it doesn't mean people who think more. It simply means that there's a preference for using a rational application to make decisions about the world. In other words, if you're going to make a decision and you're a person who has a preference for thinking, you're probably going to make decisions in a way that's black or white, that's true or false, this or that. In other words, making it from a rational, logical place. Like, for example, someone who has a preference for thinking would probably apply the law to the letter without a lot of exceptions. Say, all right, well, you committed this crime, so here's what the book says about what happens when you commit this crime, okay? Now, a feeling person, or a person who has a preference for the feeling way of making decisions about the world, is someone who generally will apply and make decisions based on values, based on outcomes to the people involved. In other words, okay, so you committed this crime, and here are some of the extenuating circumstances, and because of these circumstances, I believe that the law should be applied in this specific way this time. It's not a blanket, it's not something that's applied the same way and every time, and instead it's based on what are the values of the situation and what's the best outcome for the people involved. So two very different ways of making decisions. Now, the thinking types generally have a preference for rules and for structure around decision making, and the feeling types have a preference for checking in with what feels right, with what makes sense in a certain situation, and that could be fluid and changing. Now, this can, as with all of the dichotomies, this can become a little messy when we put thinking and feeling types together. I told the story in one of my other videos, which we've linked to above, Understanding Your Myers-Briggs Results, told the story of when I went and got my certification for Myers-Briggs, being at a table full of people who were ENTPs, who had a preference for the thinking type, and then moving over to a table full of ENFPs, who had a preference for the feeling way of making decisions. And for me, this second way was much more aligned, right? Because in the first way, as an F person being in the middle of a table full of thinking types, I felt like there was a lot of this is right or this is wrong, this is black or white, this or that, logic and reason and rationality, whereas my natural preference is to say, yeah, but what are the extenuating circumstances here? Maybe this doesn't apply every single time, or maybe this rule applies a different way here. So there's a lot of, it can be uncomfortable to be a T in a room full of Fs, because the Fs are like, potentially can seem to the T like someone who's making a decision based on things that are not very rational. And for the Fs, the Ts can be seeming harsh or black and white when really it feels to the Fs like there needs to be a softer approach or a different approach. So this is one of the more interesting dichotomies when it comes to the workplace, because these two types make decisions in such different ways. So in order to get along better, in order to have better decisions, always remember, right? What would it be like if we had a world only full of thinking types and a world only full of people who like to make decisions based on black and white? So one thing that might show up when you're looking at thinking versus feeling is that the thinking types, it's not that they don't have emotions. It's just that they generally tend to keep them closer to the vest, and they don't express them as openly or as vulnerably as the feeling types. And the feeling types, it's not necessarily that they don't think or they don't have rational bases for decisions, but simply that they generally tend to prefer to take a more feeling approach to taking decisions. Me, as a feeling type, I have a very well-developed mind and sense of logic and rationality, but at the end of the day, I'm generally going to make a decision from that more emotional place. So a lot of times to the thinking type, the feeling type can feel and seem very emotional, and to the feeling type, the thinking type can seem very unemotional or even cold or distant. So as with all of these different types, remember that we need all of it, that this is the beauty of the world that we live in, that we have different strokes for different folks. In Spanish, we say, para el gusto se hicieron los colores. For different tastes is why colors were created. And so remember that as you go into another meeting with, if you're an F type and you're going to a meeting full of thinkers, remember that we need them and we need your voice to be heard too, and vice versa. If you're a thinking type going into a room full, a brainstorming session with a bunch of feeling types, it's really important that you share your perspective and your views and bring that rationality and logic to the decision-making process. Now, I have a free gift for you. If you're interested in growing your business in a way that feels good and aligned with your true personality and who you really are, and that allows you to have a nice lifestyle, more freedom, my financial freedom and time freedom, and you want to add value to the world, then download my Monetize Your Magic playbook. Just click the link below and go get your free copy right now.